Good afternoon, everyone. And once again, a very warm welcome to the conference. My name is Vincent Chua, co-director of CFPR. And it is indeed my pleasure to introduce our second keynote speaker for today, who comes to us with a very illustrious record of career achievements. So allow me to list some of these achievements out. Professor Frans Willekens is Honorary Fellow of the Netherlands Interdisciplinary Demographic Institute, or NIDI. He is Professor Emeritus, University of Groningen, former Director of NIDI, former Chief Research Coordinator at the Max Planck Institute for Demographic Research, as well as former Chair of the European Doctoral School of Demography between 2005 and 2020. He is a member of the Royal Netherlands Academy of Arts and Sciences, a recipient of the European Association of Population Studies Award for Population Studies in 2014, as well as the recipient of the Mendel Schaps Award for the Population Association of America in 2020. In 2018, the list goes on, the Warsaw School of Economics awarded him with an honorary doctorate. He has a PhD in urban systems engineering, and his main research interests are in international migration, as well as agent-based modeling and simulation. From 2015 to 2018, he coordinated the International Panel of Microsimulation and Agent-Based Modeling initiated by the International Union for the Scientific Study of Population, IUSSP. It is indeed our honor and privilege to hear from him, a very well-renowned and esteemed scholar, and I will pass the time to him. The title of his talk is Household and Living Arrangements Projections, Methodological Challenges and Achievements. Prof. Willekens, please.
Thank you very much for this nice words, and it's a great honor to be able to be invited to present my thoughts on this at this very important conference on household and living arrangement projections, and more particularly the ProFammy software. So I propose to talk about several subjects. So I will focus on some challenges, but before I do that, I will have some history. So first some history, then some challenges, conceptual issues, and then I will have some review of data, because I think the time is perfect now to apply a software like ProFammy, because increasingly the data that are needed for the package are available. And then I will talk about estimation, because that's a critical issue, to estimate the model parameters from data. And I will give some examples. So first, the history. So, okay, I will be very short on the history because you know it, and I think the first stage was hardship rate models. And I'm not going to explain because I'm sure that has been explained to you before. That and several countries are still using the hardship rate models, although some very good multi-state models are available. Multi-state models focus on the transitions that people experience, and not only on the prevalence, on the current situation. Multi-state models focus on the changes. So first, there are several stages in the multi-stage modeling development that may be distinguished. First stage is multi-state models with household as a unit of analysis. So then you have transitions between household types. Then multi-state models where the individual is the unit of analysis, and the individual is grouped in cohorts. And the extended cohort component model illustrates this type of modeling. So now individuals experience the event, and there's a very important step forward, because once the model allows individuals to experience events, one can use conventional demographic data for household modeling. and that's very important. So the change in household is a consequence of the demographic events that people experience. The fourth stage is a multi-state models with individual as a unit of analysis, but with individual life histories. So you have complete life histories that also affect individual life histories that affect the transitions. And of course, that's microsimulation specifically. So you can account for individuals, their differences in personal attributes and in their life histories. And you can introduce random components. So individuals have different transition probabilities. And the final stage is where still the individual is the unit of analysis. The individual life histories are there, but the individual has agency. The individual is able to make decisions. The decisions whether to leave home, parental home, yes or no. Decision whether to marry or not. And decisions whether, let's say, to divorce or not. That type of model is called actor-based models. So we see that in the stages, there is a gradual development, but by increasing the complexity and the realism of the models. That's about the history. Now let's look at conceptual issues. Now, there are three interrelated concepts, basically, and that makes it confusing. When we talk about households, families, there are three interrelated concepts, and I try to explain it. A family is a network of individuals related by blood, marriage, and adoption. That's a traditional definition. The United Nations uses that definition. Most use this definition. A household is a network of individuals who share housing and who share resources, depending on the definition of a household. Some countries define household as a co-resident unit. So co-residence is the key word. Other countries define households as a unit that shares resources, food, economic and social support. So, but it's different. Co-residence is very important here. And then you have concepts like a family household. The United Nations consider it, Sengi considered it in the Pro-Family book. The family within a household. So it is a subset of a family and a subset of a household. And then you have multifamily households. And then there is still living arrangement. So living arrangement also refers to the residential arrangements. So you already see that there are some dimensions here. One dimension is the residence. The other dimension is the relationship. And then there is kinship, which is also related, but refers also to the relationship, also blood relationships and marriage and adoption. So being related by blood. So that is family and kinship are very close concepts. And of course, we have very extensive models for kinship analysis. So therefore, I suggest to distinguish between the type of household or family and the position of the individual in household or type or family. So type is a characteristic of the household or the family. Type is a characteristic of the unit. Position is a characteristic of the individual. And that's very different. That's essential. So, and then you have the diversity of ties between family members, household members. Household members do not need to be family members. They can be unrelated individuals. So it's a messy concept, this household. So therefore, I think it's important to distinguish between a relationship and a co-residence, to distinguish the two dimensions. Family refers to, and kinship refer to relationship. Household refers to location, to residence. And in fact, household is linked to housing. And that's also the initial reason for introducing the household concept, because it's related to housing, to determine how many houses are needed, what type of houses are needed, what the energy use for households are, and so on. And it depends on housing units. So to resolve the conceptual issues, We should first distinguish between the type and of household and the position of individuals. But I suggest also to move to a higher level of abstraction and to look at a family as a system, as a social system. And that's not my idea. There are several scholars in sociology who view and approach households and families as social systems. And more recently, they approach family and households as a social network. And that, I think, is where the future is. Families and households are social networks, or particular type of social networks. And there is the research on social networks is booming, and we in demography can learn from that. And social networks have been used in demography in the past. John Casterline used social networks to explain the fertility transition. A publication several years ago. So we should, that also in household demography should be founded in social network theory and social network analysis in the future. So in a social network, we have nodes and we have edges. Nodes represent individuals and edges represent the ties. So these are the nodes. Now, this is the reference person, or marker, or focal point, or ego. Ego is a concept, and alter. Ego is a concept that comes from anthropology and is used in social network analysis to determine the person of interest, or the reference person, basically, the reference person. And the other persons are related to this reference person. So A is ego, and B to F are network members. Okay, and there is a relation. So D has a tie with E, but E has no tie with D. So there's an incoming tie for E and an outgoing tie for D. But E and A, they have a mutual tie. Okay, and a dyad, concept that's also used in household and family demography, is a group of two nodes, a group of two individuals, basically. A triad is a group of three individuals. Okay, so we have characteristics of the network, like characteristics of families, characteristics of household, size, composition, and so on, characteristics of the individual, of the nodes, and characteristics of the ties. So that means in this relatively abstract framework, we have three dimensions: the overall network, the individuals, and the ties or relationships between individuals. And they can be of many different types. So the network approach, comes from sociology, basically. There are some names in sociology. And then there is a revival of network approach in family sociology, because it captured the diversity. And this is a reference to this publication. So the revival of network approach in family sociology is related to the destandardization of the life course and to new kind of lifestyles like co-parenting, transnational families, and so on. And these are some references that you could look at if you are interested, and they are all available. There's open access available on the internet. So we have to distinguish between the individuals and the relationships. And so the attributes of the nodes are individuals, are age, gender, occupation, health status, the traditional attributes. The attributes of the edges are the presence of ties, presence or absence of ties is already important, okay? So people may live together, but have no tie. They are unrelated individuals. And then if there is a relationship, maybe type, directed. For instance, 1A may be a friend of B, but B is not a friend of A, okay? Parents, grandparents, ancestors, several kinds of types of relationships, power relationships, dependence relationships, By adopting the abstract framework, it opens new perspectives to marry family demography and family sociology, and maybe family, and also family and economics, if you want. So there is a quality of the relationship. That's not about demography, but a lot of demographers are interested in quality of relationships. And the reason is that the quality of relationship is a major determinant of divorce. So exchange relationship of solidarity, and then the intensity of the relationship, which is an important concept in social support networks, the frequency of contacts, the level of support, and so on. Sorry. So family demography focuses on the structure of the family. Sociology focuses on family as an institution. Economics focus on the family as a unit of production and consumption. So here we think demography can merge or can combine insights from the other disciplines to improve family demography and household demography as a field. So now, the household characteristics are multidimensional. There is a union status, whether you live, there is whether there is a partnership, there's a marital status, that's legal arrangement of a marriage, and residence status. So union status refers to the presence of a partnership. Marital status refers to the presence of a legal contract. It can be a social contract, but it doesn't need to be a legal contract. And residence status refers to the location where people live. There are the three dimensions that can be distinguished. Now, okay, let's look at the table that is based on Segni's book on the extended cohort component model. So there is the attributes that are the attributes of the individuals. Then there is the state space, that are possible values. And then there are the transitions between these possible values. So there is partnership status, that can be married, civil partner couple, common law partner marriage, but then maybe other types of partnership, a visiting household in some parts of the world, and so on. And so the events are an entry, exit, or death of the partner usually. There's a marital status, that's a legal status, never married, married, divorced, widow. That's the kind of distinction we usually make. There's a union status, cohabitation, cohabiting, or non-cohabiting. But there may be a cohabitation contract, or it may not be a cohabitation contract, or several different things. Children, biological or adopted children, the place of residence, other covariates, and then another further on co-residence to children moving out, and so on. So that are this kind of categorization and these transitions are usually combined in a flow diagram. And this is a flow diagram also copied from the book of transitions between marital states. If we have different categories, there will be different. But there are still the multidimensional that can be distinguished, the several dimensions. There are the individuals, there are the relationships, and there are the co-residents, not co-residents in the next slide. So here we have transitions can be combined by cohort. That's a cohort biography, a concept introduced by Norman Ryder in 1965. Or the transitions can be individual. There's the individual biography. That's microsimulation. Here we have many more possible states, but still the three parallel processes, the three dimensions: union status, marital status, residence status, and they change. Their changes are related, but their changes may also be somewhat independent. Because as we will see, some people marry, but they continue to live with their parents. for housing reasons, for other reasons. Okay, take care of parents and so on. Now, okay, this is another set of flow diagram, but this is a more longitudinal perspective. That it's a pathway to first child. Okay, persons live at a parental home. Then there is a living arrangement, lives alone, married, cohabiting, and then a child is born. But as we will see, a child may be born while a person is living at a parental home, married or not married. Or a child may be born while, if a person lives alone. So there are the birth of the child is not causally linked to the living status of the parent. Now let's look at a few data. And I think, as I mentioned, there's a unique opportunity, and the timing is perfect for this conference, because there are so many data around now in the world that can be used to apply the ProFamily software package and to improve the way household projections are being done. That's, I mean, the main idea. So there are the demographic and health surveys that all of you, I'm sure, know. It's a retrospective survey, it's a retrospective life survey, but collected in a cross-sectional survey. The demographic and health survey is organized in a given year, but they collect information from for the entire life course, the previous life course of the respondent. Now, in the survey, some respondent may be 20 years, other respondents may be 80 years. For the respondent who is 80 years, you collect the entire life course, more or less. For the respondent who is 20 years at time of survey, you collect only a small part of the life course, and I will show the consequences for that. And these are the countries that have demographic and health surveys. So a very large number of these countries. And then there is, in Europe anyway, the Gender and Generations survey, but some non-European countries are also participating. And I will show you some data from that survey. Then there is the China Family Panel studies, which is referred in the publications that have been distributed in preparation of this conference. And the US Health and Retirement Survey. And the many surveys modeled after the HRS. Like all the surveys that you see here, they have used the HRS as a model. The ELSA survey in England, survey in Japan, a Charles survey in China, from Peking University, and the SHARE survey in Europe, and so on. Okay, and you have here, there's a site that combines all this information, and you can look if you're interested. And then all this data are publicly available after registration. So a lot of data available. But of course, the data are not always comparable. Several data are harmonized, but not all of them. So let's look at one survey in more particular, the Generation and Gender survey. And the survey is organized in modules. The child module, the employment module, the health module, and so on. So it's quite tricky to collect information, relevant information on life histories from these modules. But I distinguish several states. Living at the parental home, that's age. Living independently, A. And you should remember this because I will use it in my next table. Living in union, married, separated. That means separated from a union. Divorce is also separated, but after marriage. So distinction between separation and divorce. And then living apart together. And that is the death of the partner. And this is the website of where you find all the information on the Generations and Gender survey. Okay, it has data on a large number of countries, including the United States. And there are more recent countries now, but this is the harmonized data. So they harmonized the data from all these different surveys. And I use this harmonized data. It's data for 343,000 people in 24 countries. And For some countries, there is one wave. For other countries, there are two waves. Okay. So the harmonization procedure was quite complex. It involves a number of checks and edits, including labeled the harmonization done by the GCS team, not by me. It was what they did to produce the harmonized data. Label checks, consolidation, compile the information scattered around across several variables, and calculate derived variables. Let's say a number of variables are derived from a household module, children module, partnership module, and so on. But then I read this data, and this is the file. So if you go to the website and register, then you can, and you get permission, then you can download this. That's a Stata file. Okay, I use R, but I read Stata files in R, no problem. So check and clean the data. That's what I did. There was, because you see, you need it, and also in the demo rates publication, it's clear how complicated it is to find the chronological logical arrangement of events. Events have to be organized chronologically in order to estimate transition rates. So first, there are missing event dates, like some respondents did not report their date of birth, for instance. It's the same in you read the same information basically in the demo rates paper, because it's general. Then the logical sequence of events. Marriages may start before co-residence, of course. But a divorce cannot occur before a marriage. Although in the survey, there are several divorces that occur before the marriage. And what is it? Maybe a misreporting, or maybe no reporting of a previous marriage. And that happens quite regularly, that the previous marriage is not reported, but the divorce is reported. Then there are duplications. In the harmonized survey, for instance, there's information on the month in which the union is formed, but also on the month in which the marriage is formed. Now, the marriage is a union, so that has double information, and not always consistent. So I recode the event dates in the century month code. That has become more or less standard. If you have only the month of occurrence of event, not the day of event, but if you have only the month, then you do it this way. Also, this demographic health survey, they use the century month code. They distribute their data in century month code. That's very nice. And then determine the age and the status of the ego at time of death of the partner, because widowhood means the death of the partner. So if you have information on death of the partner, you have to convert that to the age at which of the reference person, basically, and the status of the reference person at that age. And that's a complicated procedure. Then determine the age and the status of leaving parental home. Leaving parental home is tremendously difficult. That's my experience. I hope you have a much better experience, because many surveys do not ask, when did you leave parental home? So you have to infer it from, when did you start living alone? When did you marry? When did you start cohabiting? And then sort event dates in chronological order. So this is similar as in the demo rates publication. Okay, then I determined the reasons for leaving home, marriage, cohabitation, to live independently, because some surveys did not ask this question. It's only then you see that the month in which a person left the parental home is the same as the month in which a person started cohabitation. Then you may infer that leaving parental home is for reason of cohabitation. So these are the events. This is the century month code in which a person is born, the respondent, when this person is born. This is when the person started living alone. This is the first marriage up to the 10th marriage, the first divorce up to the 10th divorce, widowhood, union formation, separation, and then my estimate of when the person left home. So what I see is, okay, this person is born in this month, after 1 month. So problem with the data, probably. this person left the parental home to live independently. That's not possible. But okay, I just use that to show the type of problems with the data. Because if a child leaves home at age 14, is that leaving home or is that misreporting? Very often you don't even know. Because a child may go to a boarding school, or he leaving parental home may be that parents died and the child went to his aunt. Okay, and was then raised by the aunt. That means in a survey may be interpreted as leaving the parental home to move to your aunt. Okay, then I prepared a Biograph object, and Biograph is a software package in R. It's available in archive, so you have to do some additional work. And some exploratory data analysis, estimate multi-state life table. And I use, and I will show, two kind of estimators. A statistical estimator, so-called Nelson-Anon estimator. For those of you who took courses in event history analysis, they know what I'm talking about. It's comparable to, it's an, essentially relates the occurrence of events to the at-risk population. And then occurrence exposure rates with demographic approach. And this is a kind of how a Biograph object looks like. Respondent, the century month code when the person is born, the start of the observation, which in this case is the same, the end of observation, which is survey date, the age at the end, the sex of the person, the country, in this case Bulgaria. This is wave 1 of the survey. That is the path that the person has followed. So, and then the century month in which the events take place. So this second person, for instance, left the parental home to form a union, then to marry, and then was censored at time of survey. So union formation was in century month code 1035. Marriage was century month code 1042, so 7 months later. So they cohabited for 7 months. And century month code is a way to code the month in which an event occurs and facilitates the calculation of durations. And a century month code is the number of months since the 1st of January 1900. So this is the number of months since the 1st of January 1900. That's a century month code. That's explained in the demo rates report. So yeah, there you can read it. So there are other life trajectories. So, okay, the most common life trajectory is in the survey is person still living at a parental home. So the survey, the generation and gender survey, includes quite a number of young people, and they are still living at a parental home. And then marriage, they first live alone and then marry. This left the parental home to form a union and marry, live alone, form a union and marry. And sometimes you have more complicated trajectories. Okay.
Hi, Prof. Willekens, sorry to interrupt, but perhaps we could take 10 more minutes and then we have Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you. Then the number of transitions between various states, and then at which transition to the respondent leave home. So 117, many people left the home at, okay, there must be probably, no, I don't know, the sum was wrong. I think double counting. Many people left home at to live alone, about 50,000 to marry, about 21,000 to start a union, and so on. And these are people who left home at the second event. So that means this left home, for instance, to form a union. So another event occurred before they left home. And I know what, but I didn't list it here. Now I can add children. So this is a person. There are 4,000 people, about 5,000 people who had the first child while they were living at a parental home. Some have 2 children while they were living at a parental home, and so on. So that is the cumulative hazard. The cumulative hazard is a sum of age-specific hazard rates. And it's more or less as expected. Those who leave the parental home to form a union, they leave home somewhat later, to marry, leave early, to live alone, let's say students, leave home much earlier. This is for all the data combined, 340,000. And this is specifically from the US. So in this data, I also have a 95% confidence interval, but it's very small because the number of observations is so high. When I look at the United States, this data, then, okay, at higher ages, there is some error or kind of the confidence interval is wider. This I estimated using the non-parametric approach, the Nelson-Allen estimator in event history analysis. And this is the result. It shows by age, the state occupied at the various ages. So at age 25, for instance, this proportion is still living at a parental home. This proportion is still married. This proportion is in a union. This proportion is living alone. So, okay, so that means that at age 30, few people are living alone. Most are married or union. And this is widowhood. This is the result of the life table analysis, the multi-state life table. And then I calculate the rates. And this is the other type of data you need in ProFamily. Okay. So, and it's the first time I show this because I did this exercise in preparation of this conference and to support the distribution of ProFamily, because if this type of analysis can be done for many surveys in the world, that means there is tremendous opportunity for ProFamily. Now, for those of you who multi-state demography are familiar with that, this is the so-called transition rate matrix. And for those who are not, then I applied it to Andhra Pradesh, a state in India, where the National Family Health Survey in India 2005, 2006, for 5,000 ever married women. I consider these states, and of course, sterilization is an important event in India, end of family formation. And here we have the several possible states: living at a parental home, married, first child, second child, sterilized. Living at a parental home, married, first, second, third child, sterilization. And some women very few go for sterilization after one child, as we know. And this is then the overview. This observe, that's in the data. And in the data, we have a problem of censoring, because as I mentioned at the start of this presentation, that many respondents are of a young age in the survey. So we have to take this censoring into account when we estimate our transition rates. And that is done also in demo rates software. And this is the life table. So this is the observed data with censoring. This is the life table without censoring. So this is living at a parental home. This is the sterilized. And I have several states, but you see very few women have more than 4 children, also in the state of Andhra Pradesh at that time. Okay. Now, conclusion. So there are several challenges, and I addressed 2 of them. I addressed conceptual issues, and my suggestion is to adopt a social network approach to families and households. The second challenge is estimation of transition rates. And very luckily, we have now demo rates available to help people to estimate the transition rates from the survey data. But it will still be a kind of hectic job to do, because it is not easy. It is not easy. And although demo rates facilitate and helps a lot, it requires quite some investment, but I think it's worth it. So the demographic approach, the occurrence exposure rate, The advantage is you can use the software. The disadvantage is there is no, as far as I could read from the text, there is no confidence intervals. And there is a statistical approach which also produces confidence intervals. And then, so that is opportunity, sorry for the spelling, international harmonized data on individual histories are available and can be used. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Willekens. I thought it was a scintillating presentation, and thank you so much. I like the presentation because it underscores the point that the family is a social network, and with globalization going on and so on, families are increasingly living apart, but they are still connected because of social media and those platforms and so on. But you don't just end there, but in fact also talk about the family as a process, right? And how the family navigates the life course. So then the combination of family as a process and the family as a social network, coming together, I thought that was, for me, very exciting. So thank you very much for that presentation. I see the chat box here. We have one person who has raised her hand. Duan Yuan Yuan. Duan Yuan Yuan, you want to unmute yourself and ask your question to Prof. Willekens? Yuan Yuan? Okay, I think, all right. Let me just see here. There's one question from Prof. Feng Qiushi, and he has a request, and that would be for you to say a bit about agent-based modeling, and how is it that the life course analysis may inform agent-based models? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that question. Okay. I will first say 2 words about microsimulation, and then how agent-based model extends microsimulation. Microsimulation looks at individual behavior. So it looks at individual life course. So if you have, for instance, a set of age-specific rates of transition, then you can reconstruct the life course for a hypothetical person. It's a synthetic life course. It's like Norman Ryder's concept of synthetic cohort. So that is microsimulation. You use a set of parameters, in this case, age-specific rates, transition rates, to construct the life course. The life course gives you information on the durations in the specific states. How long do you live at the parental home? So at what age you leave parental home, how long married, and so on. Now, microsimulation is based on these rates, which you estimate from data. In agent-based modeling, these rates are replaced by rules, decision rules. And the decision rule is, for instance, a person is considering leaving the parental home. But there are several factors that the person takes into account. Whether there is housing available, whether the person has an income, maybe a friend leaves parental home, and that affects the decision. So these factors enter into a decision-making process. And it is that decision-making process that enters into a model, in an agent-based model. So that means the rate of transition is replaced by decision of a transition. An agent-based model also, since you're working with individuals, agent-based models also allow you to consider interactions between people. Let's say a person is more likely to leave parental home if his or her friend also left parental home. But that interaction for some people is essential in agent-based model. But that interaction we already had in SOCSIM. we already had in microsimulation model for kinship, for instance. So, but I think the decision process, the decision rules, which come from decision theory and behavioral theory, is the key component, key aspect of agent-based models.
Thank you very much, Prof. Willekens. I have another question here by Prof. Jean Yang. And the question is as follows. The life course analysis is exciting, but is the idea similar to that in the sequence analysis in the transition to adulthood literature?
Yes, very good question. It's related, but it's not the same. Sequence analysis studies a sequence of events. So you observe a sequence of events. And what most sequence analysis do, they have observations on the life course between age 15 and let's say 40. So that means that you limit your observations to people who are already age 40. You exclude the young people in sequence analysis. Sequence uses sequence as a unit of analysis. In life history analysis, you construct sequences. You produce sequences on the basis of these transition rates, which depend on age, depends on level of education, depends on several factors, including past life history. So in sequence analysis, the sequence is the unit of analysis. In life history analysis, the sequence is the outcome of the analysis.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from participants? Prof. Willekens, if I may ask another question, I'm intrigued with the idea of family as a social network, and you have edges and nodes, right? Mm-hmm. But I think one of the factors perhaps that needs to be discussed are the resources that are embedded in the social network itself, because it is the resources, the information, and the influence that travels through these edges and nodes. Mm-hmm. So does the model incorporate the exchange and the flow of resources between the parties? So if I could sort of pose the question this way, right? Are families living apart today, but connected through the internet, in fact, more supportive than families living together?
Mm-hmm. I do not know whether they are more supportive, but you can intrude the support and the resources. And the way to do it is as follows. And I had a slide on social capital, but I took it out because I think it may be too long. But it's a concept of social capital. So if you have a relation in a network, then, okay, there are several types of relationships. And one type of relation is a supportive relationship, which means that if you're a member of a network, you know that you're in trouble, your network members will help you. That's a resource, that's social capital, basically. So you can draw on that resource if you need it. If another person needs it, you will help that person. So there is a whole literature on social capital in the context of social network. And the publication is LIN, L-I-N, 2001. If you Google, you find it. So yes, the social network and the support and the resources and the social capital are very closely related. And Lynn has written a book about it.
Thank you very much. Excellent. Any questions from anyone? A final question before we end? No? Okay. I think we are almost reaching the end, 4:19, 4:20. That's when I'm supposed to conclude. So Prof. Willekens, really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us and being part of this conference. Thank you very much. I think we've learned a lot from your presentation. So thank you and really appreciate.